The Princess of Wales, Catherine, has been a member of the British royal family for over 10 years without ever making a public error. Not one. The recent events begin to resemble a long-awaited breaking point rather than a tale of royal protocol, when you truly consider what that means and what it costs a person to maintain that degree of control over years of constant scrutiny. Allow me to introduce the scene. At a school function, there was a race for parents. The family had been informed that none existed. One was then called at the last minute, and Catherine ran it. Catherine doesn't do things on the spur of the moment, so that detail alone, the spontaneity of it, the tiny diversion from the meticulous planning of every public moment, tells you something. Not once in all the years we've been observing her, not in public. You pay attention when something changes, even a little. It is necessary to comprehend Catherine's role in this institution before delving into what actually transpired between her and Camilla, as this would not make sense without it. She entered the monarchy as a commoner with no royal ancestry, no formal education from an early age, and no guide to surviving the world's most scrutinized family. She was born into a normal family, married into one of the most demanding public positions imaginable, and has never once allowed the public or the media to use her against her. Consider what that truly calls for on a daily basis. Every trip is a show. Every expression is controlled. The smile must appear sincere without disclosing any true information. Warm but unfamiliar body language is required. When she addresses the media, her words must be thoughtful enough to be secure and natural enough to avoid sounding staged. Throughout it all, she has upheld that standard. Through the early years of intense media scrutiny, in which every picture of her was scrutinized, pregnancies that were made public, the breakdown of Harry and Meghan's relationship with the institution, and all the chaos that followed, and most recently, her own cancer diagnosis, treatment, months off, and the flurry of rumours about her whereabouts and health issues. It was all managed while she was actually very ill. That's a big deal. That is a remarkable degree of self-control, sustained under extraordinary pressure for an extraordinary amount of time. Additionally, those who know her characterize her as someone who truly recognizes that performance and work are intertwined in her role. The job is the performance. There are repercussions for every slight deviation from expectations. She is aware of that. She has experienced it on a daily basis, which is precisely why what she did is so important. A woman with that level of understanding doesn't unintentionally violate protocol. The cameras never happen to catch her on a bad day. Being Catherine for this long requires a level of discipline that doesn't just happen. She intentionally violated protocol when she did so. And since this didn't happen overnight, you have to consider what was developing between her and Camilla in order to comprehend that choice. The public perception of Catherine and Camilla's relationship has always been positive. Warmth captured on camera, well-planned appearances, and two women living together in the institution's official structures. However, those who have seen both of them in private describe a more nuanced situation. Two women who must get along, and who are both adept at doing so in front of cameras, while keeping a distance that has never truly closed in private. That has some structural components. The future queen is Catherine. The present one is Camilla. Regardless of the individuals involved, that relationship is intrinsically complex. Within an institution that is both a family and a constitutional structure with its own hierarchy, there is a question of precedence, influence, and who shapes what. The personal dimension comes next. Catherine is fiercely defensive of William, her kids, and the kind of monarchy she is subtly advancing. She finds it difficult to be trusted. She has the accuracy of someone who has read rooms for years in order to survive. And she had spent some time reading this specific room. Sources indicate a pattern of behaviour that spans several different domains. The kids come first. Not only are George, Charlotte and Louis Catherine's children, but they will play important roles in the institution's future. Their parents make all of the decisions regarding their lives, exposure and upbringing. However, reports indicate that Camilla frequently overreached herself by interjecting herself into discussions with the kids. Persistently, but not dramatically or in ways that could be directly contested without appearing overly sensitive. Little recommendations that carried the weight of her expected preferences were important. A degree of concern for the kids' lives that felt more like management than affection. Catherine saw. She is always aware of it. Additionally, she refrained from speaking because doing so would turn an undeniable fact into a problem. And she doesn't work like that. She holds out. She observes. She stores items in files. Public positioning is the second area. The informal hierarchy, who appears central versus adjacent at any given time, who gains more prominence in photos, and who the room naturally orients toward, is quite different from the formal order of precedence. According to sources, Camilla consistently appears to benefit from her positioning during certain public appearances at Catherine's expense. Each incident could be explained separately, but taken as a whole, they formed a pattern that Catherine's close friends and family members identified and discussed in private. Once more, she took it in, made adjustments, and maintained the surface. However, when the third thing happened, it shifted from frustration to something far more intimate. It was expected that discussions about Catherine's health, her capacity, and her absence would be protected and handled carefully during her cancer diagnosis and treatment, when she was at her most vulnerable point in life. However, sources indicate that this didn't happen as it should have. According to those close to the situation, discussions about Catherine's absence, her ability to perform her duties, and the implications of her health condition for the institutional arrangements surrounding William occurred during that time. These discussions included Camilla in ways that Catherine, upon learning of them, felt constituted a grave violation. It's not awkward from an institutional or professional standpoint, nor is it personally offensive in the way that only occurs when someone intrudes into areas of your life that you feel are off-limits. Catherine has contributed nearly everything to this organisation, including her privacy, her spontaneity, and her capacity to simply exist without thinking about how each moment will be interpreted. Because she was aware of the role she was taking on, she voluntarily gave up all of that. However, she withheld some aspects of her life, her marriage, her kids, her health, and the private centre of a life that is, in practically every other sense, public property. She believed that those items were safe from the casual manipulation that characterises palace life. It was different from anything that had previously happened, to have them seemingly reached into in any way by someone whose official position carries no actual authority over any of it. And the result was something quicker, something that didn't go through the typical processing, rather than the methodical, controlled, strategic patience that has characterized her entire public life. It went directly to the location where Catherine's protective instinct resides, protection of her children, her marriage, and the private self she has spent more than 10 years defending against an institution that, if you allow it, will completely consume your private self. Someone who has been this disciplined for so long doesn't react loudly when that instinct kicks in. It isn't overtly confrontational. That's not what Catherine does. Her actions are more accurate and, in many respects, more successful. She purposefully behaves in public in a way that is entirely clear to the target audience, while remaining sufficiently ambiguous to prevent formal objections. Without confirmation, you can't bring it up formally, and confirmation entails having a discussion that no one wants to have documented. Since royal protocol is frequently misunderstood, let's discuss what it really entails. It's not etiquette in the sense of social behaviour, nor is it a list of courteous recommendations. A centuries-old, well-defined system of communication that uses gesture, positioning, and precedence, royal protocol is a language. Who is in what position, who is subservient to whom, in what order, and how. Everyone who has worked in this institution for a significant amount of time speaks that language fluently. In real time, they read it. They are able to distinguish between an oversight and a statement, between a brief slip-up and a purposeful departure, between someone who has forgotten the rules and someone who is so familiar with them that disobeying one of them is the most controlled thing they can do. Catherine speaks with ease. She has been for years, and her actions during this official royal engagement were not a mistake. It was the kind of event where everything is determined by the order of precedence. Who gets acknowledged first, where they are placed, and in what order. These ceremonial details are not insignificant. They are the core of the discourse in the monarchy's language. They inform the room and the organisation about who is in what position and how much it is worth. Additionally, Catherine purposefully and conspicuously deviated from the expected order in a way that shifted her position in relation to Camilla in the current formal hierarchy. Not violently, not in a manner that photographs could clearly depict and portray as overt animosity, but clearly in the way that speakers of this language interact with one another through it, rather than merely within it. She didn't move the way she should have. She acknowledged in a different way than the required formal order. She painted a public image of her relationship with Camilla that differed from the official version by making a number of subtle, well-executed deviations from the expected choreography. It was visible to everyone in the room. Every senior royal, aide and official whose job it is to know exactly what the choreography should look like, and who therefore could tell right away when it looked different. No one spoke, no one stepped in. Since acknowledging what had just occurred would require confirming it, which would require a formal conversation that no one in that room was ready to have, no correction was made to acknowledge what had just occurred. In the enduring institutional memory that palaces amass but never formally record, the moment simply existed, seen by everyone and addressed by no one. There's a question about William now that needs to be answered. According to sources, the answer is more nuanced than a simple yes or no. Did he know the answer? Within this organisation, William and Catherine do not work independently. They work together as a unit. The focal point around which the future of the monarchy is being built. They consistently and consciously coordinate on issues of any institutional importance. The result of a marriage that, in the most practical sense, is a collaborative effort between two individuals who are fully aware of what they are creating. Therefore, it goes against everything we know about how they work together that Catherine would purposefully and significantly deviate from protocol in public without William's knowledge. However, co-authoring something ahead of time is not the same as being aware in advance. According to sources, this account of what happened is more in line with William's personality. He was aware of Catherine's temperature. He was aware that she was getting close to the point where being or watching would be impossible. And he decided, though he didn't say it out loud, that he wouldn't get in the way if she got to that point and decided to take action. William doesn't make public remarks that are jointly scripted. He doesn't work like that. He works in a more subdued and efficient manner. He eliminates barriers. He makes room. When the person next to him decides to move, he ensures that nothing is in the way. And his reaction immediately validated that dynamic. He didn't correct her. He failed to establish the social or physical distance from her behaviour that would have conveyed discomfort or disapproval to those observing. He followed her movements. Not exactly the same. Not to the extent that he was considered a co-author of the statement. However, anyone in the room who is fluent enough to understand what is happening can read the subtle physical language of someone who is in alignment with it. The message from both of them would have been very evident to Camilla at that precise moment, not because anything was said, but rather because the choreography expressed what needed to be said. We will no longer act as though you haven't gone too far. In that room, Camilla maintained her composure. She did, of course. She has too much experience and self-control to allow anything to clearly register in a public place. For the majority of her adult life, this woman has been able to remain composed in difficult situations. The surface did not break. However, according to every account from those in close proximity to the situation, composure is only a facade. Beneath it, something landed that has been difficult to process in the weeks that have passed. Because Catherine's actions weren't hostile, it is possible to defend against attacks. An attack can be refuted, disregarded, publicly reframed and briefed against via the standard channels. Compared to an attack, this was more difficult to handle. It was an epiphany, a public display of a personal reality that Camilla may have persuaded herself was more contained than it actually is. The Princess of Wales, who absorbs everything gracefully and indefinitely without consequence, is not the full picture of Catherine. It is true that she has a line, which has now been crossed. The whole picture, it turns out, is someone who reacts with something far more complex than rage when sufficiently provoked. She answers with clarity and the precise precision of someone who is fully aware of what she is doing, what it will convey, and who will comprehend it. Catherine has never displayed that side in her more than 10 years in the public eye. What she displayed in that room was a public warning that was entirely clear to everyone who needed to understand it, and was given in the language that the institution itself created. My patience runs out at this point. Don't try what comes next. The personal drama is just one aspect of what's going on here, so take a moment to zoom out and examine the structural image. The current working royal family is smaller than it has ever been in the modern era. After Harry and Meghan departed, Andrew is no longer visible to the general public. The group that truly bears the burden of representing the crown, engaging in engagements, travelling abroad, and maintaining the institution's domestic visibility, all of which are essential to its legitimacy, is very small. The centre of gravity is also clearly visible within it. It's Catherine and William. They are now more than just this institution's future. They are becoming more and more its operational presence. The weight has been gradually falling on their shoulders, and instead of weakening their position, it has strengthened it in a way that transcends their official titles. Influence derived from a title or marriage is not the same as influence derived from being truly indispensable. It is more difficult to oppose, more difficult to subtly undermine, and more difficult to move around in the unofficial ways that palace politics typically function. Catherine's influence is of the harder kind, developed over years of that kind of unglamorous, disciplined, and indispensable service. Furthermore, Camilla's standing within the organisation is relational rather than foundational, based more on her closeness to Charles than on the kind of experience Catherine has amassed. This makes her structurally weaker than a cursory comparison of their titles would indicate. Every calculation changes once more when you factor in Charles's health. The palace's communications have been well managed, positive without making promises that might not be able to be fulfilled, and reassuring without being specific. What sources describe in private is a king handling his responsibilities with real bravery and real difficulty at the same time. There are good times and bad times, a long-term course that is still unclear in ways that necessitate everyone in his immediate vicinity to be covertly getting ready for potential outcomes that no one is openly discussing. The question of who actually has institutional authority is not academic in that setting. It's critical. And with each month that goes by, the answer becomes more and more clear in favour of William and Catherine. The two of them are influencing the choices being made regarding the institution's course, its public image, and the relationships and principles that will characterise the upcoming chapter. Camilla's place in that future has always rested on the kindness of those who will make that decision. Furthermore, as recent events have made increasingly evident, William and Catherine's goodwill is not unconditional. It was never the case. More people assumed it than confirmed it. Sources close to both women have described the atmosphere between Catherine and Camilla in the weeks following the protocol moment in remarkably similar terms. Formal, right. Regardless of what is underneath, the institution mandates that the surface be maintained with expert precision. However, the distance is real beneath the surface and is not getting closer. Catherine hasn't said anything in public. She hasn't used the customary avenues of anonymous sources and strategically placed leaks to brief against Camilla. She doesn't work like that. She used the language of her choice to make her statement in that room, and she has regained the poise and self-control that have always characterized her. However, the composure of someone who hasn't yet drawn a line differs significantly from that of someone who has. The first is stamina. Position comes in second. Everyone within those walls can sense that Catherine is now working from position. The practical ramifications of a strained relationship go far beyond Camilla's personal discomfort. They permeate every aspect of her day-to-day life within the facility. The degree to which her choices influence results in the unofficial settings where the monarchy's actual decisions are made, as well as the access and conversations she participates in and doesn't. Relationships, warmth, and the kindness of those in charge of granting access to the rooms where events take place are all necessary for that. Additionally, the two individuals who will have more and more control over access to those rooms have made their positions apparent through the weight of numerous signals that all point in the same direction, rather than by making a single dramatic gesture. Right now, the next reign is being constructed. It has priorities, values, and an idea of what this institution ought to be, and who ought to have real influence within it. Furthermore, Camilla does not have the level of informal authority that she has become accustomed to under the current understanding. She still holds her title, and since the organisation requires it, and its administrators are too disciplined to permit anything else, formal etiquette will be followed. However, genuine inclusion and formal courtesy are not the same. Camilla is intelligent enough to comprehend every aspect of that distinction. The question now is what she does with this knowledge. Does she reassess and refrain from the actions that cause this reaction, or does she push once more, believing that the institution's demands for unity will shield her from repercussions? She is seriously miscalculating if she makes that second assumption. Because the woman who disregarded protocol in order to send that message is not the same person who will passively take the next provocation. Catherine has already informed everyone in the room of what will happen next. The only language that really lands inside those walls is the one she used to say it. It was read by Camilla. Whether or not she believed it is the only question left. Catherine has spent more than 10 years providing this institution with everything it requested, so she ought to the composure, the discipline, and the display of unity, despite the fact that the underlying reality was anything but. Then something happened that was unavoidable. It affected her children, her health, and the intimate details of a life that she had taken great care to safeguard. What transpired in that room was her precise, thoughtful, and fully fluent response in a language she has mastered. Catherine is the one penning this family's next chapter.